Good morning and welcome to this Legal Compliance COVIDSafe webinar series that our law firm Kaizen Synergy is running. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director of the law firm Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you to this part 4 of this COVIDSafe webinar series. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So today's agenda is part of our 4-part series. We have been running these over the past few weeks, specifically focused on the COVIDSafe operational legal compliance requirements that agencies, specifically those agencies and companies working in the not-for-profit and community services sector, need to be aware of and meet. Today's session is going to focus specifically on the different reporting requirements that agencies need to do around COVID plan reporting, QR registers, board reports, cleaning registers. So we're going to drill down into some quite specific reporting, as well as also staff and volunteer registers that agencies are required to keep, whether it be under public health and wellbeing laws, but also work health and safety requirements as well. That said, we are also just going to recap some of the past information that we've also delivered and agencies have asked questions on, specific questions that agencies have raised around some of the HR and also vaccination rules and workplace requirements as well. So to put it into context as part of our series, what we have looked at is really, and what's become apparent, is that rolling lockdowns may well be a part of life, certainly in 2021. In 2020, when we run these COVIDSafe webinars back all the way through from the start of this pandemic in February, we've seen a gradual change in the way that state governments, territory governments have actually managed the COVIDSafe requirements and issues with COVID-19 more generally across the country. But it does look that rolling lockdowns will be a way of life as we move through. So what can agencies do, and what are some of the reporting requirements that can actually help you manage your agency during this period, and how can you keep your staff and volunteers and also agency open to deliver key and essential services that you need to deliver? Well, we have supported over the past 12 months now a number of different types of agencies, and these are just some of even the agencies that are joining us today. And you can see it is quite a diverse group, from legal advocacy services to disability, Aboriginal services, right across to aid agencies, mental health, refugee and shelter services, and also council networks as well. So what can agencies do in terms of reporting? How is this how can this be made simple and easier to ensure that you are keeping up to date with your legal compliance obligations without being bogged down specifically into having to report on items that you're really not sure of what the benefits are, and whether you're flying by the seat of your pants, so to speak, around what you need to actually do. So we're going to actually use some real life case studies around this. Now, by attending this webinar, there are some, since February 2020, we have onboarded some 4,000 plus agencies right around the country in terms of some of the systems and processes that we're going to talk about today. Now, with this, we are looking at giving you a better understanding of what the COVID rules are, improve your awareness, obviously from an HR perspective as well too, and importantly, see what other COVID-safe systems and activities other companies like yours are actually doing that is working from a legal compliance point of view. And it's actually helping them grow and operate during this pandemic crisis. And we're actually going to use some case examples to explain this as well too. A few housekeeping items. As always, these webinars are recorded all the way up to the Q&A part of the session. You can ask questions in the chat group or the questions panel, and we encourage you to do that as well. We will get to all questions throughout the webinar, and if we don't, we'll certainly get to those at the end of the session. All materials referred to, including these slides, will also be circulated out to you today as well. We do have a knowledge base that is created with weekly circulars, and all attendees that have joined our webinars over the past 12 months do continue to receive these as well too. If you do have any questions, by all means, please contact our law firm. The numbers, contact, and my mobile contact number is also listed here as well. So just a brief way of introduction, because we have a couple of agencies, quite a few agencies joining us for the first time today. So with that, we have, as part of our legal work that we do, while our law firm is a legal firm based in Melbourne, we work right around the country and pretty much cover all parts of Australia as well too, and even have offices based in the Pacific Islands and neighbouring countries as well. Over the last number of years, we've received awards from Aboriginal agencies for NAIDOC awards for going above and beyond the call of duty, as well as also had our IT system, the Gemba 360 legal compliance system, published in IT journals, and also awarded presentations at the Dubai International Emergency and Disaster Conference some 10 plus years ago, and also been awarded other public-private partnerships as well. And quite often, we'll be asked to work between law firms to support agencies in the projects people do in the not-for-profit sector. As part of that, our Gemba 360 legal compliance system is a compliance system used by not-for-profit agencies right around the country, and it has been an integral part of their COVIDSafe work since last year, and we'll be referring to that in today's webinar. That said, you'll all get access to this as well too if you don't already, and that will be given after today's session to you to view. The web-based platform Gemba 360 is a legal compliance system, and with that, it is web-based, it is run by our law firm, and you don't actually need a desktop to run it on, because it also works off every mobile device that you can use as well too. So it does make it completely flexible to use, and a lot of not-for-profit agencies use it around the country, especially for volunteers, registers, and to ensure that appropriate COVID forms are completed. But we'll come to that throughout the session. So let's have a look at some of the legal compliance registers that we're going to be looking at today. Now, what are legal compliance registers? Why and what does each do? Essentially, if you're going to take one message home, then this is probably the slide that we're going to keep coming back to and build upon. Essentially, each agency should have by now its own COVIDSafe plan. That said, we're also seeing state governments right around the country asking for essential services to have what they're calling a daily attestation register or attendance register, which is really there for staff to complete or volunteers to complete before they deliver services. And we'll show you what one looks like and why that's important. Equally, you're well across, or you should be well across things like contact tracing for check-in, QR codes, for workplace sites, events, vehicle ride sharing, and client sites. Most agencies that we speak of know about the workplace sites, but they forget about things like events, vehicles that might be shared within their agency, and also client sites that they might visit as well too. The other parts that we've covered off over the past few weeks is also HR staff registers, but also importantly, workplace and cleaning registers. So really, when we look at the legal compliance registers, it's broader than just the public health guidelines and legislation that is there. A lot of these will cover things like HR, privacy laws, work health and safety requirements, health and well-being legislation as well too. So we'll find that from a compliance point of view, keeping up to date and these registers and how you actually do this is important for boards of directors to ensure that they get timely reports, and we'll show you what ones look like, as well as for management from an operating point of view, and also when required, contact to the department as well. So we will be covering off these legal compliance registers and what these mean and how and what you should be looking at if you don't have one or more of these already. As part of that, we will also be drilling down, as we've done over the past few weeks, into quite specific legal compliance reporting from a register point of view. And when we talk of staffing, we broadly are meaning obviously employees, volunteers that work in the not-for-profit sector, as well as members and board members as well. And some of these we will be walking you through as part of this process. We will also be showing you some of the important parts of involving different levels of staff within your agency as well. And one of the frequent questions we get asked is, look, we're either a small agency or we're big. What is the difference around this? Look, the difference really at the end of the day is going to be you all, irrespective of size, have an obligation to ensure not only you meet your public health directives provided by the Chief Medical Officer in the relevant state or territory, and we'll show you what that looks like, but also from a work health and safety point of view, we are aware, for example, in Victoria, where QR coding and workplace registers, attendance registers, certainly Safe Work and the departments have stepped up their audits in the last week, and they've been quite public about this in sending those inspectors out to ensure that agencies are meeting their compliance obligations. So let's go back and have a look at just briefly, and we've covered this in the past webinars before we jump into the reporting side. So when we talk of COVID-safe plans, we're not going to drill right into these because we've certainly covered these in weeks 1 and 2 of these webinar series, and you can access these on our website and also on our channels as well. And just to show you where those are, when we do jump across onto these as well, you can view these, and we've just got a couple of questions that people ask of where they can view these. You can visit our website, kaizensynergy.com, and go to the knowledge-based webinars and information page that is listed here. You can also log in to the Gemba COVIDSafe dashboard by clicking on this button here, and that'll take you to this screen here, which we will give you the login details for those agencies that are joining us for the first time. Also, our webinars, especially around the COVID safety, is also made available on the Gemba 360 YouTube channel, and you can watch all of these information dating right back to February last year as well. So that is there for yourselves to access. Now, that said, coming back to the COVID safe plans, essentially it covers a number of different criteria. When we look at the workplaces, essentially we can divide the workplaces into different areas. And this was a diagram that has been taken by one of the Department of Health and Human Services. So essentially when we look at what is required and what generally the expectations are, this diagram tends to cover these off quite clearly. What we see, though, out of this is essentially where we need to place our reporting around this from a compliance point of view. So essentially we have the check-in points and attendance registers, we have the cleaning and disinfecting schedules, we have the office meetings and events and record keeping for all visitors of when and where they need to actually and what needs to actually be done. That said, there are essentially some guidelines which we've covered off in the past around when and where to practice things like good hygiene, and also keeping records of if workers or clients become unwell. And this is where we start to get into the compliance reporting side, as well as what is actually required. So this is essentially guidelines provided by the Department of Health, and essentially one of the questions that then comes up is, well, how do we essentially meet these requirements from a WorkSafe point of view? How do we define or determine hotspots if we need to pull this information? What about cleaning the premises, and what actions do we need to take if in the event that rolling lockdowns are suddenly a direction that we and our agency needs to follow. So essentially following these specific guidelines around this is what we have covered over the past few weeks. And this material will be circulated around to you. It also includes now the COVIDSafe plans as well as the occupational health and safety requirements. And you can see that there are a specific number of listed items, things like WorkSafe guidelines, pandemic guidelines, industry plans, preventing infection in the workplace, around each of what your COVIDSafe plans should contain. Now, what we have found from an occupational health and safety compliance point of view is that these guidelines do change. So what we have put in to your dashboard for you, and I'll just bring this up, is that under the disaster area, clicking on that will bring up this panel here. And we have basically gone through, depending on which state and territory the attendees are joining us from as well, and your agency is based, you've got access to the relevant guidelines. And essentially, we've created the checklists for you that you can go in and actually complete these. And you can see here, any actions or comments that I'm doing will then be recorded on the date and the time. And this is just our demo site that we've got here. And it will tell me what also changes we've made. All of the documents that I've just shown you, for example, if I jump back to this department guidelines here under the Occ Health and Safety legislation, again, all those reference documents can be then found under the Documents tab here. Now, the COVIDSafe plans are in fact what I'll call a moving target, clearly. It's not just about having the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, which if I bring these up and bring these back here, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, but essentially what it is that these criteria will change based on the relevant guidelines that you have. And we've just got a question here asking, is this where we can also get QR codes updated? Yes, absolutely. Your QR codes that you can use, you can see it here, is also listed here as part of your agency to use as well. And we'll come to that when it links back to your contact tracing. So essentially, we've got your COVIDSafe plans. And this means that as part of the compliance and enforcement, it means that you must comply with current directions and advice provided by the relevant health authorities. Now, what this means is that in certain states, what is being quite clearly directed on is that ensuring compliance checks will continue to roll through 2021. And this means that you must be compliant with Public Health and Wellbeing Act legislation. WorkSafe will continue compliance and enforcement under the Occupational Health and Safety Acts. Now, what we are finding is that agencies are saying, well, if we need to document all this information down, what is this type of information that we might be called on? And let me show you how quickly, and we'll come back to this, how quickly a compliance report can be or should be able to be generated. Now, this is my compliance COVIDSafe plan, and I've got that listed right here. Now, if I wanted to, if an inspector comes through and says, show us your compliance plan of what we've done, now I should be able to generate this pretty much on the spot about where it is. Now, all I've done is just simply click the PDF document. What this generates for me, this is all being done in real time for you as well, is here is my COVIDSafe plan report as of right now. And this gives me a summary of exactly where things are at. It brings together all of the specific reporting that I need to see, as well as what the dates and the times are. And obviously, this is just a demo site for us, but essentially it gives me that high-level report of what I wanted to see. If I needed to drill down into individual activities, I can actually do that and essentially then report those out. But essentially, the COVIDSafe plan should be a living document that as things change within your agency, and this is where we will send legal compliance feeds to agencies to ensure that you're kept up to date with any changes that occur within your activity space. So when we look at the legal compliance obligations, and I'm just going to walk you through these areas and then come back to these. Essentially, all agencies are required to have their COVIDSafe plans. These should be built upon the legislation, things like biosecurity legislation, public health and wellbeing acts, directives coming from the departments, be that the Commonwealth or state governments, as well as the relevant safe work checklist and your state pandemic plans. These are then identified within the self-assessment guides that your agency uses. On this, you do then have your self-assessment checklists, which feed into your COVIDSafe plan. Now, just recapping some of the workplace rules, and I'll just go back one slide, thank you. Here we are here around the COVID vaccine and the workplace. Now, this is something that no doubt will continue to evolve over 2021. And over the last few weeks, we have covered the questions around, can an employer require an employee to be vaccinated? What are the individual requirements? And is there legal advice that should be sought and when around mandatory vaccinations and whether your agency is also covered by these? Whether you need to also look at agreements or contracts relating to vaccinations in the HR space, and what type of directions you can provide to staff and volunteers as well. We also covered off what happens if an employee or volunteer refuses to be vaccinated. Can you require an employee to provide evidence that they have been vaccinated? And we've covered all of these off over the past few weeks. And that also includes if an employee refuses to be vaccinated, can you require them to provide evidence? And whether if they refuse to attend the workplace, whether because a co-worker isn't vaccinated against coronavirus, where do you stand as an employee? Now, this also includes things like disciplinary action if a staff member refuses to get vaccinated. And all of these slides and information, a few people are asking, will we get copies of these to answer these questions for you? Absolutely, we'll be sending these out. And just a reminder, if you are listening to this recording as well and you want access to these, then please email us or contact us on our 1300 360 360 number, and we'll send these slides out to you. Equally, also, if there was specific anti-discrimination laws that you also need to think about because of particular characteristics that staff or volunteers may well be covered by. For example, those that have a disability, are pregnant, or have specific religious beliefs are all requirements that you need to consider. Now, as we start going through new employees, what your obligations are for them and whether you can ask them to be vaccinated before starting work, but what does this then look like from a reporting point of view? You have all of this information. You have these policies and guidelines that we've talked about, and we've got the templates for this on your Gemba system. If you don't have access to it, please email us and we'll cover these off for you. Now, what has agencies done to look at some of the reporting, pulling that they can do to manage their COVIDSafe obligations and meet their legal compliance point of view? Now, with it, two agencies that we've referred to, and we'll use them again, is Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative up in Shepparton, and we thank Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer, for giving us permission to share some of the knowledge that has been developed over the past 12 months now, since February 2020. And equally, Women's Housing Limited, Judy Line, the Chief Operating Officer, we extend our gratitude to her, and also Lena Tompkinson, the Compliance and Executive Assistant, and Lindy Parker, the Chief Operating Officer there. We have essentially two quite different agencies. Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative is an Aboriginal health service, but is a very broad health service. They cover everything from medical aged care, disability, advocacy, housing services to a vulnerable population group. And we have Women's Housing Limited with around 30 staff and providing housing and refuge services to women, and also specific services for men as well too. Both of these agencies are quite different. As I mentioned, Women's Housing is about 30 staff. Rumballara has about 200 to 300 staff. Very, very different in terms of their number of sites as well. While Rumballara has a number of key sites that they work from, Women's Housing also provides a diverse number of sites, and many of these are I'm going to say protected sites as well too. So they have to be quite careful in disclosing which sites they work from, obviously providing support and refuge services for women. That said, they have done quite consistent approaches in their systems and their compliance systems that they have used. Now, with it, I will just cover off the QR coding as we have done in the past webinars. I won't go into detail around these, but just to say your Gemba 360 system gives you the QR codes that you need to do. We are also working with various state governments around QR codes as well too, to allow improved contact tracing from an agency within your system directly into the department system as well. Now, with it, the QR codes, in terms of why doing it and functionality, it should be quite simple and easy to use. Obviously, for agencies that have a quite specific client group that have difficulty navigating IT and mobile systems, such as people with a disability that pose a barrier, or people that are elderly and don't use mobile technology, then again, the check-in systems need to be in place to be able to accommodate these different client groups as well. Essentially, they work in the same way. Now, with these, you can actually join us in doing this as well too, and it is a live demonstration that we have done. Now, essentially, when you scan the QR code that's up in front of you, what you will find is that it'll open up automatically on your phones. And this is just a demo site that we've used as a testing site for the Women's Housing Service. Equally, for those agencies that require that attendance registers, again, the information is there. What this does is flow into your Gemba dashboard, and it allows you to run your contact tracing directly. Now, an agency that we will use from a QR point of view is this group here. This is Damien Aiden at the Balranald Local Aboriginal Land Council, and this is a demo site that we're using. Now, once the QR code is scanned, essentially what happens is you'll see you have a COVIDSafe contact tracing button here. You can access your forms by jumping in here, and you can actually see the date and the time when that person has jumped in and registered. We have these QR codes, and you can see all the information that was placed on your mobile form. So when you used your mobile to scan it, it'll come up here, and this gives you your register. So from a compliance point of view, what you'd have is your COVIDSafe plan as well as your contact tracing information all in one spot. Now, agencies have asked us the importance of this. From a work health and safety point of view, how can you need to be able to show WorkSafe how your registers work. How are you showing them that the QR codes are being scanned and how many people have actually scanned in? And also ensuring your staff and volunteers do this as well. And you can essentially see this by literally scanning back your code that you have here. You can use your phone, and that information is then recorded here. So you've got your compliance pathway and your scanning being able to be controlled all from one spot. And we note when we've done this, and also in discussions with the department, that once you scan sometimes department QR codes, it goes off, but you have no way to actually verify that staff have actually done it. The other directives from a compliance point of view is that department agencies have asked not-for-profit agencies and community services that provide direct services for a daily attestation register. Now, the daily attestation register, and you can see the guidelines here around this, is that the staff that are providing services direct to clients should be providing a confirmation that they do not have any of the COVID symptoms. And as part of that directive, what you have located is a daily assessment form. And what agencies have been able to do is essentially ask staff to log in, complete this form, and it does vary based on where your agency is based. So whether you're a legal advocacy service based up in Queensland or in WA, or if you're a disability and health or neighbourhood house service based in New South Wales, this form will change based on the public health directives coming from your state health department. And this form will change. Once a staff member logs in, so they log in, and let's say we'll use Damien as an example. Damien logs in. He goes into the daily assessment forms that we see here, and essentially his name, the date, and the time automatically come up at the start, and he confirms this information here. What this allows them to do, and this again is something that has been supplied by the Department of Health and Human Services around daily attestations that people need to complete as part of their work. Now, it's not simply enough that you're checking in. So essentially you've got your check-in point, and you then got your daily attestation form that needs to be completed. Now, the registers we've covered off as part of that for either the QR codes, but also essentially the staff checks. So essentially what you have is a number of different registers. The registers themselves, when we look at this, is the COVID assessment forms. You've got your working from home registers. You've got your cleaning registers, and all of these feed back into your COVIDSafe plan. Now, importantly, when we talk of the registers that staff need to complete as part of their HR profiles, we find that agencies have turned around to us and said, where do we keep vaccination registers? Obviously, there are a whole lot of HR information. If we ask staff for confirmation that they've got their vaccines administered, or if they don't, we've got information about why they didn't get it. Well, again, what you've got access to around this, and I'll just bring this up for you to be able to see as well, is the specific HR register. Now, if I click on the HR button, what you'll see here is this information that we've loaded in, and this is the test information to show you how this works. What we have set up is the ability to actually add in information around the specific fields, and one of these is called the COVIDSafe register as well. And this is where you can actually add this information in and also add further information around vaccination registers or information as a file note about why a staff member hasn't had it and discussions that you've had. This effectively leaves a client file note for you to have for your individual staff and volunteers. Now, if we wanted to run the reports for this, what we have set up is the COVIDSafe HR register and COVIDSafe vaccination register that you can automatically run. And running these essentially shows you exactly where you're at with all of your registers. And you can see that here, when I click on run, it'll bring up a test run report. And it is really made as to be as simple as that. So within it, what you're able to essentially run is all these different reports that you need at any one point in time. These COVIDSafe registers, and we've just called it the vaccination register because it is two things that agencies have asked specifically for, to make it as simple as possible. And you're able to do this literally instantly at any point in time whenever you're called on to actually do it. Now, with it, the registers, and this is something that we acknowledge the work that we've done with Creation Ministries International and Sonia out there, the compliance officer. She's done some incredible work for Creation Ministries International, which is a religious agency that provides information, religious information, right across all states and territories. Now, they've used an event and workplace attendance register, which they still use, to manage some of their events. And the look to move is to QR and scan in codes. So essentially what you've got from your compliance reporting and COVIDSafe system, and this is important for your boards, is to be able to make sure that they're aware that they're meeting their work health and safety obligations. What I've covered off is essentially the plan to show that you've got the information within the COVIDSafe plan. You've got the staff training and policies in the Gemba Docs and e-learning that we covered off a number of weeks ago. Importantly, you've got your pandemic forms for staff to complete and volunteers to complete as required before they deliver services for your agency, as well as you monitoring your HR and risk reports as well. Again, Rumballara covered off a number of specific policies, and these get updated from time to time as the legislation changes. And we suggest your agency looks to do the same. In terms of being who's involved, and this is a big question that agencies ask us, from a work health and safety point of view and from a compliance point of view, it is important that all staff, all volunteers, irrespective of size, and look to work together on completing these set of activities. Agencies like Rumballara and Women's Housing have actually been doing these for a number of months, some of which agencies that we worked with since February last year have literally 20,000 different entry points, and they can go back and actually have a look at information that they've done at any point in time. We've used a number of case examples around this, and we do stress that Women's Housing in particular for the QR codes has actually had to place on these types of signs with their QR codes and how to do it, and check-in registers which cover staff, volunteers, contractors. Their registers are active and they can generate these reports at any one point in time as well. What we do suggest is that you do have a look at the Gemba 360 HR dashboard. Our recommendations are that you look at your policies to start with, and if you align them with our essentially our compliance reporting slides that we've put together in these materials as well too. The HR registers by miles is probably one of the most important registers that agencies in the not-for-profit sector forget. While you might have your staff COVIDSafe plans, the staff need to be involved in looking at attestation, what they call attestation forms that they submit at least to you weekly around these. Vaccination registers start to be compiled as part of this process as well. If you do have any questions, then by all means, please contact our law firm on the 1300 360 360 number, or you can email us directly at support@gemba360.com. Next week, we are looking at running a special session around setting up some of these COVIDSafe systems. We can actually see a large number of questions from agencies asking us to run through actually setting this up, and we're happy to do that for you to show you how this works as well. Of course, if you have any questions, by all means, please contact me directly on my mobile 0413 699 515, and that has been available right across this pandemic as well, and happy to field questions from you at that time. We will open up the phone lines, and more than happy to stay online and answer any questions that people might have. While we are opening up the phone lines, we do thank you for joining us, and if you are listening to this webinar through a recording. If you do have any questions, by all means, please reach out to us on 1300 360 360, or you can email our support desk at support@gemba360.com.